How to enable HDR and VRR, which is variable refresh rate, on your Linux system. Okay. So first, you'll literally physically need a monitor that supports both, because if you don't have that, then basically the software, meaning in this case KDE, won't be able to actually properly do it, or it'll just look funky. So in this monitor that I have, which is a Gigabyte Aorus something something something, let me get the name here. There it is. Aorus FV43U. In my case, a Gigabyte there that I can control many things with. It has an HDR of 1000, which is the highest one that I found here in my country. And if you press a little button that's below the name, physically, a button that's below the name in the actual monitor, the word Aorus, you actually get this thing here. So you get this little beautiful menu that if I try to record the screen, you're not going to be able to see because it's actually integrating into the monitor, not the operating system. So for this particular model, if you go to display, there's the HDR. If you don't have it enabled, this is very important for you guys to know. So if you don't have it enabled and you come here on KDE and you enable this, it will look a little bit washed out is the term. I would say it would turn like a monochrome grayish um, desktop. So it'll try to create those colors between white and black, but it will look very grayish, a lot of gray levels, because it's trying to do HDR on an SDR, okay, range. So that needs to be enabled. You can enable it on the monitor. You don't need to reboot the computer. In my case, if I do enable VR adaptive sync, in this case here, if you go to gaming adaptive sync, you enable there. I do need to reboot my computer because they talk to each other once the computer boots about, hey, do you have VRR? Yes. Okay, beautiful. Then let's enable all this stuff. And that will, do the refresh rate syncing there properly. So, and you actually get this option here. If you don't have VR enabled on the monitor, this doesn't show at all. So take that into account. If you don't have HDR enabled, this will still show, but it'll look weird depending on the monitor. Okay, so depending on the monitor, at least in the Gigabyte, it looks just grayish. There's other cases, well, where things look like they're melting, like everything looks like it's melting, like it's washed, like you threw water on top of them. It just looks weird. So once you have those two enabled, you can actually enable this here, and the effect that you're gonna see is just a lot more colors, let's say color range on the Linux games. On the Steam games that actually support that. Let's put it like that. Once you enable it, my recommendation is for you to um put the brightness in the proper percentage that you actually want, because the moment that I enable this, I go blind. It's very bright because of that whole HDR. So I have to lower, I recall that I have to lower at 45 or something like that. In order for me to actually more or less see it like I'm seeing it here. But just to recap, you go here to your monitor, not the operating system. The computer could be turned off, the monitor could be turned on, and the monitor, the actual monitor, should have an option. If you have a fancy monitor, like in this case, yeah, they should have a button or a control, remote control, something to enable this, um, the menu, and then through the menu you actually looking. It even has KVM. Holy mother! You look for the HDR, you enable that puppy, and then you look for the adaptive sync, which should, depending on your monitor, is somewhere in there. Okay, so in my case, it's the gaming adaptive sync. I enable that baby, and then I turn on my computer so they understand that the VR is there. If I were to turn off the adaptive syncing in the monitor, basically the variable refresh rate, this option goes away. This one, you don't see it actually there. And yeah, and that's it. And that's the way that you actually get it. Obviously, you need to have an NVIDIA AMD card. Obviously, you need to know that my recommendation is to have an HDMI that's 2.1 and above, or a display port that's 2.1. You can use a 1.4A or 1.4. I forgot. Right now I can't remember the numbers, but I know with 1.4 it works. The one that I'm using is 2.1 because, dude, I just don't want to be like in the limits and stuff. Um, and that's it. It flows properly. I got no problem. I'm more pro display port because of the whole thing that has happened with HDMI, and that's it. And once you enable the HDR, then you get to actually play around with this too. I'm going to do it right now. I don't know if the recording tool will be able to capture this, but let's see. So we enable that. I click apply. If you can still hear me and see me, then this thing just went super bright. Just lower a little bit there. I got good vision. Let's just put it like that. Here's the color intensity, color accuracy, which is what I want. If we click here, it shows a super bright, like this is a nit. Jeez. It's a lot of, put it like there. Okay. Yeah. There we go. Okay. That's super bright for me. Okay. So if you can still see me and all that, there you go. And adaptive sync, we can leave it automatic. We can set it always. Here's the thing. When you do have adaptive sync enable and you enable the VSync on the game, you might, I could say the word might, but you are gonna feel, if you're into shooters, if you're sensitive to very low latencies and stuff like that, you are gonna notice there's something weird with the input lag. Okay. So my recommendation is don't enable, you can enable it here. Okay. But don't enable the VSync on the game. Instead, if the game offers max FPS, then put it a little bit below the refresh rate here. So if we have 144 here, leave it at 140 on the game or something like that. So you have that buffer zone. And that way you don't suffer from the input lag at all, And you still keep the VRR. Okay, you don't enable the VSync, but you limit it by the a little bit below the refresh rate, and that's just a trick that I learned tuning and doing crap in there. That's it. So hope you the video helps you, and that's VRR and HDR for you on Linux. Thank you.